fine.
It's kind of fun to hear about how you and Grandpa met and kind of his ordeal in courting you.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you don't know quite what to do with your life. But anyway, of course, we met in Austin, Texas. We met at church, and I had just gotten down there. He knew I was coming. I didn't know anything about him, but anyway, he knew I was coming because I had called the branch president and see if he could help me find a place to live. Or I'd written him a letter. And so he found me a place to live, and he had a place to live for me. And anyway, I got there and got settled in and went to church the next day. And I thought I did pretty good because I rode the bus system. And it was downtown, and it was held in a, what was the name? It was a laborers union, and they used to have to go in early and clean the place up before they could have the church, because sweep up put away the models and the cigarette butts and whatnot. But anyway, and so I was a little bit late, and getting there, but not really, and the meeting had actually started. And when I got there, and I just hurried in and sat down just as inconspicuously as I could. But anyway, that was the first time that we saw each other, and we didn't actually start dating until about Christmas time, I guess it was, and we dated all the time until I went home at the end. I went home at the end of August. I was there for a year. I had a fellowship that I'd go for a year, but it was renewable each year if I wanted to continue it, and it was called the Rosalie B. Height Fellowship. It was cancer. It was supposed to be something related in cancer because she had died of cancer. And so I was assigned to a particular professor in the biochemistry department, and he was interested in the effect of electricity on living organisms. And he had measured the difference in electrical potential between the bottom of the tree and the top of the tree, and a lot of different things. And he had done some work on onions of some type. I don't remember what he did, but the onions developed little white nodules on the roots. And he wondered if the electricity, he was doing some kind of he was sending electrical impulses through these onions. You sit them in a test tube and let the roots grow down, and the roots would grow down. And so that was my assignment as my project that I was to do, was to see if I could determine what caused those nodules in the roots, because it was not a normal thing. Normal onion, you pull it up, there's no nodules. But anyway, so that's what I did in the summer. But he was so involved in the politics of the school. You know, there's politics no matter what you're in, work or anything. And he didn't pay much attention to me. I don't know whether he was not very impressed or what. But anyway, he just gave me that assignment. And I tried a lot of different things. The first thing I did was I put them all covered with black paper so they wouldn't get any sun. Didn't without something, and grew onions and stuff. And anyway, and pass electric currents through them. It didn't, after a while, it didn't seem like it was the electricity. And so I grew them with and without the black paper. And they had the black paper on, they didn't get those nodules. So it seemed to be the sunlight that was causing those nodules. I mean, just in a rough analysis, that apparently was at least it. So I more or less had finished that assignment, and I had to decide whether to renew and go the next fall. And I was planning to continue going, and Grandpa graduated in the end of May, early June, with his bachelor's degree, and so he was going on home, and we had some, well, not really disagreements, but anyway, he went on home without me, and sent me all these postcards along the way. But anyway, after a while, I began to have some second thoughts and decided I didn't want to stay, so I called him. I knew where he was and been writing to him. I called him on a telephone and told him I was going to come home. And could I see him, and that sort of thing. So I did. I went home, and so we. Anyway, he happened. He was when he got there. He got a job with Utah Power and Light in Salt Lake City. And so, where did they send him? But they sent him to Rexburg, Idaho. And Rexburg is just 10 miles south of where my family home, where my parents lived. So when he got established up there, he went out to the farm to meet my folks, and I was still in Texas. And he managed to find it. It's kind of remotely settled out on the edge of the little farming community. He and I guess my mother was out. Was she out pumping water? Anyway, we still had the pump. She was outside. She saw him coming, and she just welcomed him with open arms. We weren't engaged or we hadn't, decided anything yet. And she knew his name right away, and that pleased him because they knew who he was because I'd written home about him, and they just took it. In fact, I used to say later, I think they liked him better than they did me. But and you know how Grandpa is, he just makes himself at home wherever he is, and he helped them, and he'd go out there. And then when I came home, of course, he was out there a lot. And it was Thanksgiving time that we became engaged, and they gave me a ring at Christmas, and then we decided to get married in April, and so that's what we did. And then he was still working for Utah Power and Light. He was an estimator. He would go out to the different places where they had to put in a new line or something, and he would plan and estimate how much the line was going to cost and that sort of thing for Utah Power and Light. And so after we got married, we lived in Rexburg in a little garage that had been converted into a little one-room apartment, and I didn't have any electric stove, just had a coal stove, and just heated with heaters. But it was a fun little place. And then after Andrea was born, well, in fact, just a little bit before, we moved out to live with my parents, and because we had decided to go, he wanted to go back and get his master's degree at the University of Texas. So we lived there until we left for Texas in the middle of August, and Andrea was about 5 months old when we went down there. And anyway, then we went to Texas, and we're down there 2 years, and that's where your mom was born, of course, is while we were in Texas. I had sort of thought I might go back and work some more on my degree, because I already had a year there, and so. But in order to do that, I had to find somebody to tend Andrea, your mom, and I don't know, when I was just coming home one day after I got there, I bought all my books and I was all signed up for classes, and I got home and realized how much I missed my little baby girl, and I just thought about it, and I thought, these books are not what I want. I want to have a family and stay home, and so I just put them aside, and I never was bothered again about having desires to go on and finish my degree or do anything. And so we just went on with life from there. Grandpa got his master's degree, wrote his thesis, and I did most of the typing for it. We had to buy a typewriter to get it. We didn't have much money. We got, what was it, $100 a month. Was it $100 a month? On the GI Bill of Rights, which was a wonderful thing. That was good for a lot of young couples. I think we paid much more back in income taxes than what it cost the government. But it was a good investment for the government. Anyway, we came back and got a job with Geneva Steel, which it really wasn't in his field, and there was so much cronyism and different things like that, and it was horrible. He didn't like it, so he went was able to get a job with Utah Power and Light again, and he worked there for. And he worked there. I think he worked there until we decided to go. Until we went with I keep going to say Unisys, but it wasn't Unisys when we were there at all. You can't remember, can you? No. Sperry, Utah, right. And he was the 60th person signed on there. Somebody told him about it, that they were going to establish a company there in Salt Lake, and so he carried over and signed on. He was the 60th person signed on, and they didn't have any buildings, they didn't have anything, so they sent all these new people back to Long Island, where they had a facility, and they would go back there for training and just be. And so we went back there with him with our 5 little children, 5 children by then, and Karen was just 5 months old, so we headed out in August. Everybody thought we were absolutely crazy, and I guess we were. But anyway, we had a good 3 months there, and we started Carolyn, your mom, at school, and she would have been 6 that October. And so she went to school back there actually for a while because they accepted her. But when we got back to Utah, she was too young, and they went. So she had to wait to really start school till the next year. And Andrea went back into school. So I don't know what else. What just went on in our family until finally. I remember when we actually moved out to Kearns before he went to work for Sperry. And we did not have very much money. It was not a high-paying job. I think we could go back to our little book that we keep track and find out exactly. But I guess it was around $400 a month or something like that, maybe a little less. Keep wanting to think it was a little less. And then after we found out about Sperry, and he interviewed with him, then we got this telegram that came to the house there. And so I called him up at noon. I always called him at noon to talk to him during the lunch hour, and called him and read this telegram that we had. And I don't know why he's done, but I thought I'd saved it. But we were getting $620 a month, and I just cried. It was just like having a gold mine, finding a treasure, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so then things were a little easier for us. But and then by that time, then we had the 5 little girls. And so it was. Went back to New York and then home again. So in all this time, while we were busy in the church, and we were always active doing things in the church. And when we, we went in 56 and 59 was when Grandpa was called to be the bishop, and that was the biggest shock of my life when we went into the stake president's office. And I thought I was going to faint. He was a 70, and I've just never given it a thought, and that just really surprised me. I don't know why it should have, but it did. And so he was bishop for about just a year and a half. Then he was called into the stake presidency. But just not long after he was called to the bishop, to be bishop, we were expecting again, and I was going to a doctor in Salt Lake, the same doctor that my sister was going to, and about 4 months along with the baby, and I began to get this fever. And I had a little fever, and I woke up and I was hemorrhaging and everything. I mean, it was really, really bad. So he raced me into the hospital, and we had to get the babysitter over there, and called the doctor, and I think my obstetrician was was sick. I didn't realize it afterwards, but he was sick, and he came in, and they didn't know what was the matter. I had a really high fever, and I aborted the baby. And so anyway, there was some kind of blood infection, and I don't know what they ever found out about it, but Grandpa was really, really worried. In fact, they told him they didn't know what I might have, leukemia. And so he called the former bishop, the one that he had replaced, and he came in and gave me a blessing. And that was one of the most spiritual experiences of my life. I was laying there, and as they were giving me the blessing, and he was pronouncing the blessing, Bishop Fuchs was pronouncing the blessing, and it just seemed like the whole world was pink. Everything around was pink. Just it's beautiful. And I knew instantly that everything was going to be all right. The baby, of course, the baby had been aborted, and but everything was going to be. I was going to be all right. I was going to be all right. We found out later that the baby had died for some reason. Whether it was the infection that had killed the baby or not, I don't know. But that was after, of course, after Karen had been born. She was, I don't know, 3 years old or something like that. And then we had Barbara about another 3 years later. But that was a tremendous. I can remember that. I don't know for yourselves, when you've had a spiritual experience like that, you never lose it from your memory. It's always there. And the impressions and things are always there. And so that was a great, great blessing in our lives. And it was nice when Grandpa was in the stake presidency. We had the opportunity to meet a number of the general authorities. I remember Elder Benson came out, and Elder Hunter. They were all apostles at the time, of course. And Elder Hunter was just the sweetest man. He came in, and at that time we had stake conference had both a morning and an afternoon session. And so what we would do, the wives of the stake presidency, we would prepare a luncheon, and they would just eat dinner there, and we'd have dinner for the general authorities. And so, and then I was trying to remember the name of this other one, but there was, quite a few that came. They would come almost every time, because they did. They went around the church to the different state conferences then. And President Hunter, while things were waiting for them to come to the dinner, we're sitting there in the Relief Society room, and he's a great musician. President Hunter he had his own band and traveled in Japan, and he did a lot of these things. He was a great musician, but he sit there and watched Eileen plunk out "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" in the piano. Very gracious, sweet person. So those were nice blessings that came about. It was Grandpa being. Then we decided we had to move out of Kearns because our house was too small for our growing family, and we found and moved down to that was in Highland. Moved to Highland and built the house. We just barely poured the basement in June, and this was in 1964. And we poured the basement in June, and we worked on it, and we'd go down, and as soon as Grandpa got home from work, I had children fed and a lunch for him, and we'd just take off, and we'd go down and took all the kids and worked down on the house till oh, 1 o'clock in the morning, we drive back up to Kearns, and we had to get up and go to work in the morning, so we did that all that summer. And finally, we moved into the house. We had the subfloor on, and we had the walls up. We didn't have, let's see, did we have the brick on by then? I think we had the brick on. But, and we didn't have any rooms finished upstairs, so we just slept in the basement. We had with sleeping bags and on the beds, and we put down put in a quick sink and some, just to have a place, and I had wired it for a refrigerator and a stove, and we'd sit there at dinner, and the wind was blowing, and it'd blow the dirt down through the subfloor down. So I finally took some paper and covered up all the strips, so we would get dirt in our food. So we worked on the house while we were living there, and we did move up. At Thanksgiving time, we moved up to the bedrooms, and at Christmas time, Christmas Eve, we moved the refrigerator upstairs, us and all the little girls. See, Andrea was 15 at the time we moved down there, so they were so happy because of that. Anyway, that's Grandpa. We always do things, and everybody had to help. We worked on the house. Took us a couple of years to really finish it. And so it was a good house. I can't think of, I don't know what else. What shall I say? I don't know.
Is there any favorite memory of your childhood or anything like that?
Yeah, I had, as I say, we were very, very poor, and I remember one time when I was about 8 years of age, and of course kids don't realize how bad off you are. We had food and a place to sleep and warm, so that's all children really really need. But I remember the Red Cross came and they gave us some clothes and things, and I got the prettiest ruffly pink checked gingham dress. Oh, I can still see it. It's just, or either I imagine it, I don't know. But anyway, so we had that, and I remember we used to keep all the spoons in kind of a pitcher, a little glass pitcher base. So that's where we kept our teaspoons in this, and then we set our knife and forks on the table. If you wanted teaspoons, you put out there. And sometimes they would put change in there, and I remember them talking about it, saying that, well, as long as we've got that in the spoon holder, we're not broke. I don't think there was over $1 in there. But my father worked so hard, and he had lost 2 farms, and so we ended up, in this farm we were on, we left and finally ended up renting for the remainder of the time that he was there. He was on a pretty good sized farm, rented, and that's when he supported my 2 brothers on a mission, and me in college, and my sister in nurses school, and nurses training. She became a registered nurse. I don't know, we did a lot of things at home, and of course we always went to church. My father was a member in the bishopric for a time, and I don't know what other callings he held. I can't really remember. But we oftentimes, before we had a car, of course we always went to church on either the sleigh or the hay rack.
Oh, wow.
And the horses, they just tie them up to the wagon and get in it and come back home again. That's where I was baptized. We met in a kind of a frame church, and it was the canal, the irrigation canal ran up. And I was telling you about how they was sub-irrigating when it was sub-irrigating. So they ran all these canals, and then all the farmers took their water out of the canals to run over the property to bring up the sub, which was watered up from underneath. And this canal ran in front of the church, and that was where we had our baptisms, and that's where I was baptized. And that too is one of my very poignant memories of being baptized. I can almost still remember how it felt to walk down into that water and the water running a little bit. I was baptized by Brother Christman, and being baptized and hearing his voice pronounce the blessing and going under the water. It was a wonderful experience for an 8.5-year-old. It was a spiritual experience. And that feeling, I still love to go to baptisms. I think baptisms are wonderful. And then we were confirmed at the fast meeting right after the baptisms. They would hold it do the baptism, we change clothes in the outhouses. And or clothes and then we go have. I'm not sure. Sometimes we held our church sacrament meetings out under the trees in front of the church if we go. And I can't remember whether we did on that day for sure, but anyway, I don't remember too much about the actual confirmation. It was confirmed by my father. So that was a good experience for him.
What did you do for fun as a kid?
Okay, well, we had lots of games.
Yeah.
Our folks bought us a lot of games. We had anagrams, which is kind of similar to Scrabble a little bit. You'd make words, and then but in the process, you take the words from other people. If you could make a word out of their word, then you got to take it. And so we had that, and we had Chinese checkers, and we played lots of games. We didn't have any face cards. They were absolutely not allowed to have face cards. We had a rook game. We never played rook. We played another game called Pangendrum. I don't even remember how we played that, but we did. We played a lot of games. We had books. And I read a lot of books. Whatever books was at school, I read them. So we did that, and of course in north of our home was a bunch of ponds. These ponds were up against a string of sand hills. It had this, well, you know how that Trevor's Ridge is that comes out in Salt Lake Valley, about between Salt Lake Valley and Utah Valley. Well, there was a string of mountains like that, and the southwesterly winds would come and blow sand in, and they'd build up these sand dunes. I don't know, have you ever been to the sand dunes where they're high, they were quite tall, and we'd go out there to play. It was, maybe, I don't think it was even a mile from our home, and slide down these sand dunes, run around on them, and out on the edge in the summer, these ponds would accumulate. So you'd run down the sand into the ponds. They weren't very deep, but it was fun. There would be pollywogs in it in the springtime. You could go out and see the pollywogs. And so we played in places like that a lot. And growing in the sand dunes were chokecherry trees. And every summer we'd go out and pick chokecherries, and my mother would make jelly out of them. Our things we did were simple things like that. We had no way to go anyplace. There wasn't anything. I was quite old before I even saw a Ferris wheel, or they did have circuses would go through the country, and they'd have a little circus. And I remember my father took us to that one time. I remember they had I guess it was a big octopus or some big ugly thing there. You know, we saw this octopus, but we saw elephants and a few things, and so they would take us to that. And they had also 2 warm spring areas. And they had swimming pools built around them, and that was really a nice place to go. And often the high schools would go out there, and that's where we'd go have our parties about to these. Went to High Sea, it was called, and went to Pincox. And it was swimming in warm water. It was just wonderful. And so that was one thing we would enjoy. But around home, it was just simple things. We didn't have bicycles. We couldn't afford bicycles or ice skates and those different things. But we, in the winter, we played in the snow, built forts in snowman, did all the things that little kids do. And we had a lot of chores to do, and we had to. From the time we could do anything, it was always carrying in the wood box behind the stove, so it was always full for my mother. And we didn't even have a well for a long time. We just drank out of the irrigation ditch, why we didn't catch typhoid or something, because some of them just, I'm sure of it, just ran through other people's barnyard, you know. I don't know, it's just amazing how we all survived. But we get sick sometimes. I remember my little sister got real sick, and when we get sick, and to have mustard baths and steam baths, and if you got sick, the one thing you got to drink was raspberry juice, canned raspberry juice, and that was a treat. And received a lot of blessings when we'd be sick. And I got pneumonia when I was 13, quite badly, and the doctor came out. That was when the doctor would come to your home, and I don't know what it affected my heart. He said I needed a heart stimulant. They could either give me some caffeine or I could drink coffee. Well, they thought the easiest thing was letting me drink some coffee, and they said I absolutely refused to drink that coffee. I wasn't going to drink any coffee. I think I finally did, but that was like drinking poison, you know. We'd been taught so firmly not to drink coffee or tea or smoke or any of those things. But I came out of that all right. I guess I was pretty sick, but everything was fine. And the one thing we always did, and my father loved, and that was to go to Yellowstone Park. And we took several trips to Yellowstone Park. And the automobiles we had, I don't know. The one was, I guess it ran pretty good, but in order to start it, he had these two wires and he held them together with a clothespin. And so whenever we had to start the car, or we stopped, we just take the clothespin off, and then it was time to go again. Just put it together with the clothespin again to hold the contacts together. I don't know whether it was one connected to the battery in the starter or what, but anyway, so we traveled all that way through the park, and we had, it was really fun. We'd take all our own food, and we'd take blankets, and it'd usually take 2 or 3 days to go up and around, and spread our blankets out on the ground. And I remember I was lying there in the bed at night, and we all make one big bed, and fall asleep like this, and I'm kind of up, and I was awake there, and I heard this sniff around, a little scuffle. Well, I didn't move, and I know that there was a bear walking around there up above my head. We were just looking for food, you know. And but anyway, that was one little experience there in Yellowstone Park. But we went several times, and it was quite a journey up there. It was about, I think it was 90 miles up to West Yellowstone from our home, and a lot of it went through the pines. My father, of course, we just burned wood. Principally, we had some coal, but we burned mainly wood. And in the summertime, he would go up and cut down. You could just go up and cut down trees. I don't know whether he had done it or not. I hardly think so, but he would go up and cut down the trees and stack them, and then go up and get them with trucks and that later. And sometimes we'd go up there. I remember one time when we went up to get it, and it was always fun because, you know, to be up in the mountains. I really loved to be up in the mountains, and we'd have special things. We got to have canned milk for breakfast with our cornflakes. That's one time we ever got cornflakes. That's when we'd go off on our little trips. And one time they were cutting down this pine tree, and and of course you watched everybody and made sure everybody was out, and just as this tree started, I don't know how much far down it got, my little sister, I think the tree twisted a little bit as it fell, because they would cut it almost off and then push it over. And I don't know whether it twisted a little as it went down, and she started to run in the path of the tree coming down. And my father was over there like that, grabbed her, and I don't know whether he kind of deflected the tree from her as it fell down. And I still remember that. She wasn't very big. She was 5 years younger than me, but she was only, I don't know how old she was, but she was just not very old. So that was one experience we had. And we used to go huckleberrying in the summertime, go up the mountains and pick huckleberries. Oh, they were so good. Yeah, really good. And the big ones, sometimes you find some that are about as big as the end of my little finger. And my mother would bottle them, and that was a real treat to have huckleberries in the wintertime. And so that was a fun thing to do. And so my father saw to it that we had some fun things to do, but of course, there was lots of work on the farm. We had just the 2 boys in the family, so the girls were out working, and it was weeding potatoes all the time. We went from one patch to the other because my father couldn't stand to see any weeds in the potato patch, so we tromped up and down the potatoes all day long, hot sun all day long. Kids think they're so bad off these days, but we didn't know how bad off we were. What is that line from, the German, not the German, but the Russian film, where he says this couple where they had the sewing machine. Oh, what's the name of the Russian big movie?
Oh, Fiddler on the Roof?
Fiddler on the Roof. He says, they're so happy they don't know how miserable they are, you know? But we had, we were a happy family, and one thing that was nice that how I learned a lot about the gospel and life after this. My father's family were very family oriented and into genealogy, and they always held family reunions, and they would come up from Utah. A lot of them are still down there, and they'd get together and go over family reunions and things and tell stories about, I don't know, what all kinds of things, and where this family saw this person when they came back, or they talk about their families and everything. I was kind of a funny child, but I'd rather sit there listening to the grown-ups talk than go play with the kids. I'd sit among the grown-ups and listen to them talk and visit. And I think, and sometimes we go visit my mother's family, her brother who lived down near Idaho Falls, and stayed overnight with them, I remember one time. And they were all active members of the church, and I think all those things combined to make me know who I was as a member of the church. And I think that my real testimony and knowledge of the gospel came later, but I always believed in it, always believed in Heavenly Father and our Savior, and knew about Jesus. And we always made special, Christmas was a special time, and reading the scriptures. And although we didn't study scriptures much beyond